Good morning all. Welcome to Conduct Learning, How to Learning with Study. And we are at our chapter Chemical Reaction and Equation, and this is the first chapter for class 10 science. In a previous video we have done what is a chemical reaction and what is a chemical change in a matter and how the chemical composition of a matter is getting changed when the chemical reaction is happening. Today we will continue with the next topics. What are the reactant and product in a chemical reaction? So here in example, a simple reaction of magnesium with oxygen is given. The same reaction you have done in a previous video, where the magnesium and oxygens are reacted and give you the magnesium oxide. So magnesium and oxygen here in these equations are reactant and magnesium oxide is a product. That means to say the substance that undergoes chemical change in a reaction as like magnesium and oxygen are known as reactant, and the substance that is formed after a chemical reaction is known as product. So in the other word we can say the substance which are doing a chemical reaction or which are undergoes for a chemical change are known as reactant, and the substance which is formed after a chemical reaction is known as product. Or we can also understand what are the reactant and what are the product by just looking at a chemical equation. And how this is done, just see. As you can see in the equation highlighted in red color, the Mg represent the magnesium and O2 represent the oxygen. And these two substance, magnesium and oxygen, written on the left side of a chemical equation when arrow is pointed toward the right is known as reactant. Or the product are represented in the chemical equation on right hand side when the arrow is pointed toward right. So the thing is you have to look at this arrow. When the arrow is pointed from left to right, the product are on the right hand side of this arrow and the reactant are on the left hand side of this arrow. So by just looking at the equation you can find out reactant and product. So this is how you can understand what are the reactant in a chemical equation and what are the product in a chemical equation. So next thing is, after you understand what are the reactant and what are the product in a chemical equation, the next main challenge is how to write a balanced chemical equation. So the rule for the same is, first of all, count and compare the number of atoms of each element on the left hand side and the right hand side of arrow. So as you can see in this equation, first of all, if we look at this, the magnesium having one atom, and if you look at the oxygen having two atoms. So on a left hand side we count the atom for magnesium and oxygen. How you understand what are the atoms and where they are written, you can simply understand by looking at the foot of this symbol. If this Mg symbol having written something in their foot, this is representing a number of atoms. Now in this Mg there is nothing written in this in the foot of this symbol, so we understand or we take it as 1. So magnesium having one atom. In the same way, the oxygen having 2 written in the foot of the symbol O, yeah, oxygen, this is known as 2 atom of oxygen, right? So magnesium having one atom and oxygen having 2 atom. But on the other side, on the product side, MgO, here magnesium being a one single element having one atom in their foot, because nothing is written, so we consider it as a 1. or oxygen is also having nothing written in its food, so we consider having one atom. So that's why we can see we count the number of atom in a reactant side of the chemical equation for a particular element, or on the right hand side of chemical equation for products for particular element. So this is the way how to count the number of atoms. So the count and compare the number of atoms of each element on left hand side and right hand side of the arrow. This is a rule to start balancing an equation. Second point, is the number of atoms of each element same on the both sides? If yes, the chemical equation is balanced. You can see you have to check for each element कि number of atom for each element are same or not. Here you see on a rectangle side magnesium being an element having one atom, or oxygen being an element having two atoms. On the other side, on the product side, magnesium being an element have one atom and oxygen being an element have again one atom. So you can say the magnesium element is balanced but oxygen is not balanced, because on the reactant side oxygen having two atom and on the product side oxygen having one atom only. So this equation is not balanced. So we can say this equation is unbalanced. Yes, if the oxygen also having here two atoms, so we can say the equation is balanced, but it is not here. Third point is, if not, if the atoms are not balanced for a element or for a equation, the equation is unbalanced because the mass is not the same on the both side of equation. That means to say the mass is unequal. The number of atoms are different for reactant and product in a chemical equation, means to say the mass is different, and the chemical equation we can say is not following the law of conservation of mass, because as we done in our previous classes, what the law of conservation of mass is saying, the mass can't be created, not be destroyed. The mass should be constant. As the energy law is saying, energy can't be created, not be destroyed. The same way, law of conservation of mass is saying the mass should be constant even or after a chemical reaction, right? So the mass of the reactants should be equal to the mass of the product, and the rule is not following there. So that's why the equation we can say is unbalanced here, because according to the law of the conservation of mass that you have studied in back, mass can neither be created nor be destroyed. So that means the total mass of the element present in product of chemical reaction has to be equal to the total mass of the element present in the reactant. That is what I was saying. The mass should be constant. What? Even or after a chemical reaction. Before a chemical reaction, the mass of the element, and after a chemical reaction, the mass of the reactant or the elements should be same. In the other word, number of atom of each element remains same before they and after a chemical reaction. This is the same thing repeated again. The mass, because the mass is calculated through the number of atoms of each element in a chemical equation. So that's why if we count the number of element if are same, then we can say the mass is constant. If the number of elements for reactant and product in a chemical equations are not same, we are saying the mass is not constant, right? So we can say the chemical equation is non-balanced. So the next agenda is to, after understanding the rule, the next agenda is to balance the chemical equation. So for example, here is an example how to calculate the number of atom, as I also described you previously. How to calculate the number of atom and what is the easy way to calculate it and what is the easy way to understand it, it's given there in this slide. For example, here is an example of a chemical reaction where zinc and sulfuric acid. Zinc and sulfuric acid are reactants which are giving a product zinc sulfate and hydrogen. So the element on the left hand sides, these elements on the left hand sides are known as reactants, and these elements on the right hand side of this chemical equation is known as products. In the previous equation we having the two reactants but single product. Here we having two reactants and two product. Here the reactants are also R is equal to 2. That means reactants are 2. Here the products are also 2. So in this particular chemical equation, we have to find out is the equation is balanced or not. So we have first of all write out the symbol for zinc, that is Zn. And for sulfuric acid, the chemical formula is H2SO4. So we have to first of all enlist these all elements, because we having the 4 elements in this reactants. First is zinc, second is hydrogen, third is sulfur, and fourth is oxygen. We have to first of all enlist these elements. First we write the zinc, as in the sequence zinc is coming first. Secondly, we have write down the hydrogen, as it's coming after the zinc. Third, we have write down the sulfur is coming on third, and after that we have write down the oxygen, it is coming on fourth. So zinc, hydrogen, sulfur and oxygens are enlisted there as an element column, in an element column. After that we have to count the number of atom in these reactants. So first of all we will calculate the number of atom for zinc, which is nothing but 1, because nothing is written there, so that's why we consider it 1 atom, as I described you earlier. After that the hydrogen having the 2 atom, not element. Hydrogen itself is an element and it is having 2 atoms, so that's why I mentioned 2 atom in hydrogen. After that a sulfur, nothing is written in the foot of the sulfur or S symbol, so I consider it as a 1. So it is having the 1 atom, so that's why I mentioned it a 1. After that the oxygen is having the 4 atom, or it is written in the symbol of oxygen foot 4, so that's why I consider, or it's actually a 4 atom on oxygen. So zinc is having 1 atom, hydrogen is having 2 atom, sulfur is again having 1 atom, and oxygen is having 4 atom. This is how I calculate the number of atom in a reactant of this equation. Secondly, I will start calculating now the number of atom of product side. So I simply see zinc Zn having nothing in their foot, so that's why I consider it as a 1 atom. So zinc is having 1 atom, so that's why I write here 1. After that the sulfur is also have nothing written in its foot, so that's why I consider it as a 1 atom sulfur, so that's why I wrote 1 in front of sulfur, where I mention the element S. तो S के सामने ही हमने 1 लग दिया. After that I go for the oxygen. Oxygen having written 4 in its foot, so that's why I understand by looking at this the product side oxygen is also having the 4 atom, so I mentioned so 4. After that H2 hydrogen. Hydrogen is having the 2 written in its foot, so that's why I consider 2 in a hydrogen atom, so that's why I mentioned 2 here. So in this way I look at this table and I found whatever the amount of atom in particular element on the reactant side is equal to number of atom in the element in a product side. So zinc having 1 atom in reactant side, the same is on the product side. Hydrogen having 2 atom in a reactant side, hydrogen having 2 atom on product side. Sulfur is having 1 atom in reactant side, sulfur is having 1 atom in product. Oxygen is having 4 atom in reactant, or oxygen is having 4 atom in product. So that's why I say the equation is balanced equation. The equation is balanced. This is how to understand which equation is balanced or which equation is not balanced. This is the easy way. Next we will continue with the unbalanced equation. Next is unbalanced equation. We have done one example previously for unbalanced equation. Here is another example. The previous example was on magnesium and oxygen reaction gives magnesium oxide, and that equation was unbalanced because the reactant side the number of element for oxygen was different and the number of atom for oxygen on product size was different. So that's why the equation was unbalanced. Here is the another example for the unbalanced equation. Here we take an example for iron reaction with water, where the iron is represented by Fe, which is a symbol for iron, and water is represented by its chemical formula H2O. And the output for the equation is given there, Fe3O4 plus hydrogen gas. So iron oxide plus hydrogen is the output for this chemical equation. Now we start writing first of all the number of element on the reactant side and the number of atom for each element on the reactant side. So first I figure out the elements. First elements come iron Fe, second element is hydrogen, and third element is oxygen. So these three elements are enlisted there. And the atom on the reactant side for these three elements are, for iron it is 1, for hydrogen it is 2, and for oxygen it is 1. Because we understand when nothing is written in the foot of the symbol, we consider it as 1. So we consider number of atom for iron is 1, and number of atom for oxygen is 1. So the same thing we have listed there. And now we will calculate what are the number of atom for these three elements which we are listed there on product side. So here the number of atom for iron element is 3, which is mentioned there. The number of atom for oxygen element is 4, which is mentioned here. And the number of atom for hydrogen element is 2, which is mentioned there. And if we start comparing these number of atom for each element on reactant side and product side, we found that the atom for element iron, or which is represented by Fe, is not equal. On reactant side, the number of atom for iron is 1, and number of atom for product side is 3, which is not equal. The difference is here for 2 atoms. 2 atom difference is there. And number of atom for hydrogen on reactant side is 2. Number of atom for hydrogen on product side is 2, which are same. So difference is 0. The number of atom for element oxygen is 1 on reactant side, and number of atom for element oxygen in product side is 4, which is again not equal. The difference is here of 3 atoms. So this equation is unbalanced because of iron and oxygen. The mass for iron on the reactant side is different than the mass on the product side, or the mass of the oxygen on reactant side is different than the mass of oxygen on product side. So this equation is not following the law of conservation of mass. So that's why we can see this equation is unbalanced. This is the meaning of unbalanced equation. Thank you.